Hello and welcome to another Coffee and Craft podcast where I chat and drink coffee and you listen and craft. Well, hopefully you'll stick around and listen, but the crafting is optional. What are we talking about today? Well, we're talking about stuckness. Specifically how last year I found myself and my Etsy shop very, very stuck. To the point where I was even thinking about quitting Etsy altogether. It just got to the point where I was putting in a lot of time and effort and I wasn't getting very much, if anything, in return. And it just felt like an imbalance that I couldn't fix. But fix it, I did. And that is what this podcast is going to be about today. I'm going to talk about what I did to unstick myself. Now, as a caveat, not everything that I say may be applicable to you and your situation. So listen along, take what serves you, and feel free to leave the rest. But I'll try to make it applicable to as many people as possible, as much as I can. Okay, so it was about April or May time last year being 2022, that I noticed a shift. Although the year had started off with a bang and really strongly, I don't know why that doesn't sound right, but it doesn't sound right. It got off to a strong start is what I'm trying to say. Despite that though, around April or May time, I noticed a shift. And it felt like a shift that had been coming for some time. As I film this, it is now September 2023. Here in the UK, we are slap bang in the middle of a cost of living crisis. And what I was starting to feel then was the beginning of that. It started creeping in, and eventually around autumn time, I think it had gotten to the point where you couldn't ignore it anymore. However, I recognised that it was make or break. I could either pivot hard and fast and try to wake up my shop again and try to get those sales coming in, or I could quit. I did consider quitting, I'm not going to lie. Running your own business is an absolute roller coaster, and I'm not going to lie, it's a roller coaster that sometimes you're going to want to get off of. And at that point I wanted to get off it. I decided to pivot hard and fast. I wanted to make sure I had tried everything before I gave up, so this was like the last ditch attempt. Thankfully it worked, and here is how. The first thing I did was I recognised that the kind of customer that Etsy was attracting had changed. They were there less for the higher ticket items. They still sell on Etsy, but it's a different kind of customer. For the main part, the kind of customer that comes to Etsy are looking for lower ticket items now. So I had to pivot my customers. To do that, I needed to pivot my items from the finished handmade products that I made to something that was a bit more supplies-esque, something that they were looking for, something that they could do themselves. I'll get back to that in a minute. So the first change I did was pivoting from want items to need items. What the heck do I mean by that? Well, first of all, it's subjective, and whenever I talk about want versus need, there tends to be strong discussions about what exactly that looks like. But here's the thing. What that looks like is going to look very different from niche to niche, from shop to shop, from person to person. We could all agree that I think things like shelter, food, warmth, that sort of thing, these are need things. These are things that you can't sell in an Etsy shop. And stuff like cushions, even thread to a certain degree, want items. My life is not going to end if I don't have thread. However, if you are an embroidery artist and you make and sell things with embroidery floss is going to be something of a need. And while some people would definitely consider coffee to be a want item, I would personally describe it as a need. See, it's subjective. Take the ceramic artist who made this mug, for example. They make ceramic art. You could argue that that's a want item, and so they created these mugs, a bit more of a need item. If you want to have a drink, you're going to need a vessel with which to drink from. And if you're a white, basic, autumn-loving woman, you're going to need a pumpkin mug. As a bit of a tangent, you have no idea how much trawling on Etsy I did to find myself a handmade pumpkin mug. Give it a go, I dare you. The amount of mass-produced tat on there, I was scrolling. This took me 4 searches. 4 separate searches on Etsy on 4 separate days of me scrolling before eventually the algorithm provided me with the creator of this mug, and I will be back for more. Only next time I'll be buying from their website. Because if you want to really support makers and creators, website, if they have one. And Etsy, the next time I put handmade something into the search, perhaps you could serve me up with some actual handmade stuff. That would be amazing. But I digress. So yes, I looked at my niche, I looked at the items that I made, and I thought to myself, for my customer, what is more of a want item and what is more of a need? Now, if I haven't made it clear, hand embroidery, that's my thing. I also like making project bags because I like to knit and I like to make things that I would use. And that was kind of what gave me the clue. For someone looking at my shop, a finished hand embroidered hoop to hang on their wall as decor is more of a want item. But for someone who also enjoys embroidery or wants to get into embroidery, providing a design and the stuff to stitch up that design themselves, that falls more into the need category. So hopefully you can see what I mean with regards to applying the want versus need theory to your own shop. More of a need item. That's not to say that the want items have no place on Etsy. They absolutely do. And as a maker, creator, artist, it doesn't mean that you can't make those want items or the more creative artwork. It just means you have to have some people pleasers, and you also have to know your people and how to please them. That was the first thing that I did, and I was able to come up with a list of items that fell into what I felt was more of the need category, which does well on Etsy. The next thing was to refocus my items towards evergreen items. And what I mean by evergreen items are things that can be made again and again. This is not new. Most people know this, and I knew this. But I also enjoyed making one-of-a-kind items. I still enjoy making one-of-a-kind items. However, when you're trying to sell things consistently so that you can make enough money to pay the bills, that can be problematic sometimes. So if you make one-of-a-kind items and you're a bit stuck, my advice would be to consider bringing in some evergreen items that you can make again and again. And this can be something that you can have in the shop all year round, or you can go the route that I did, which was I was making seasonal products, so like autumn products, winter products, spring products, blah, 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 blah. And doing that was fairly easy. I just looked at the main holidays and the main buying events that came up throughout the year, and I picked 1 or 2 from each season that was most relevant to me and my business. Now, if you're going to take this route, you don't have to cater to every event, every milestone, every holiday going. Just the ones that are relevant to you, just the ones that you can make things for, that you have ideas for. And then the last strategy that I used to try and get my shop unstuck, it's called the lipstick effect. Well, I think it's nicknamed the lipstick effect, but I think its actual name was the income effect or the revenue effect or something like that. Should have done my research before I sat down to film, but I didn't. So we'll stick with the lipstick effect because it's well known as that. You can Google it afterwards if you would like. Basically, the lipstick effect is this concept that even when a person's personal budget is reduced, such as a cost of living crisis, people will still treat themselves to affordable treats. So okay, the lipstick effect. How did I apply that to my own shop? I took my niche, I took the things that I made, and I took my customer, and I tried to think what sort of thing would they be looking for as a treat, an affordable treat. Now, like a lot of people, my disposable income has gone so I don't have money to throw around on wants. And yet, yes, I'm using the cup as an example again because I think it's a perfect example, really. Lipstick effect. Did I need a cup? No. But was I able to justify buying a cup even though I didn't necessarily need one? Yes. Because I wanted to treat myself and I need something to drink my coffee out of. I convinced myself that I needed this mug. I did need this mug. And you can't tell me different. Did I drink my coffee out of this mug to use this as an example of the lipstick effect? Yes. Yes, I did. And also, just to show you, because it's beautiful. Now, granted, this is a very simplistic summary of what I did to unstick my shop, as it were, but it did work. Pivoting my items so that they focus more on need over want, making my items a bit more evergreen, and implementing the lipstick effect, revenue effect, income effect, whatever you want to call it. Those 3 things. And it really worked, to the point that at the start of this year, I was able to invest in building my own website, which was not something I was in a position to do a year prior. And the reason I decided to do that was because once my sales picked up and I was starting to make a decent income from Etsy again, yeah, the fees just got a little bit too much, and I just thought they're taking a wee bit much for my liking. There was nothing wee about it. They were taking a chunk, and I was just like, I need my own website now. Does that mean that Etsy is not a good fit? No. I still stand by what I always say, in that Etsy is a really useful tool to have in your toolbox. If you are not at the point where you can invest in a website, don't worry. Etsy is still a good fit, but just make sure that you want to be working towards getting a website at some point. So if budget is the only thing holding you back, that's fine, but just work towards it. I know Josh Silverman has said in the past that, oh, people try websites. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something along the lines of people starting websites and then they realise that they're not so easy. It's like, actually, Joshua, in my personal experience, getting started, getting the blimmin' thing up and running, that was the task. But once you get it up and running, most of the time it's better than Etsy. There have been exceptions. I will say that, because I don't like to just speak on the good things of any one thing, hence why I'm often having a go at Etsy. But most of the time I'm making more sales on my website than I do on Etsy. Most of the time, although there have been a couple of months where Etsy has just cinched it. August was a good month for me, which was saying something considering I had to take most of my items down for the majority of it. I've already spoken about that in a previous video. And I will say that, touch wood, the last few months on Etsy have been doing pretty well sales-wise, considering that I haven't been very active there. And when I say very active, I mean I've relisted things as they have reached the end of their listing lifespan, and that's about it. And yet, sales have come in. And I do think, for all of the nonsense that I give Etsy, it is worth pointing out that I have made organic sales without doing much. So it does come down to your products, it does come down to your customers. This is why I wanted to make the video today, because I think it is all of the work that I did with this massive pivot last year. That is the reason why I still make fairly consistent organic sales. Organic is key. Because I do know that there are a few videos out there that really hammer home the importance of ads to make sales. Don't get me wrong, ads can work really well for a business. But here's my personal 2 cents about ads. Relying on ads for your income is not a sustainable business model. You should be able to take away ads and still have a viable business that stands up on its own 2 feet. If ads is one of those feet, your business is going to fall over the moment you take it away. There you go, that's my 2 cents. By all means, have ads, use them if you need to. Just don't become reliant on them. If you are only making sales when you run ads, then something's amiss. You should be making organic sales as well. People are going to shout at me in the comments. Ultimately, I think it's about being willing to make items that your buyers actually want. Some people call it people pleasing. Some people call it playing to the galleries. Some people call it selling out. But if you're running a business with the intention of making sales, where's the problem? And it kind of reminds me of this conversation I had years ago with a friend. He was an architect and he was very much over it. And I asked him if he could make a living doing absolutely anything, what would he do? And he said he'd be a carpenter. So I said, maybe you should look into that a bit more, lean into that. I thought carpentry sounded pretty bloody cool. But he pointed out that he didn't want to become a carpenter because then he'd have to make things for other people and he'd have to focus all of his time making the things that other people wanted as opposed to what he wanted. Which I get, but I also remember thinking, well then you're always going to be an architect. Because here's the sticky thing. Regardless of what you do in life, regardless of what you choose to do, you could hop from one to the other. It doesn't matter. There's always going to be an element to every job that you don't like. I don't like doing my taxes. Nevertheless, it's not something I get to skip. This is the problem. I think as artists and makers, we can sometimes let the artist and maker and creative brain do all of the driving. And I've said this before, if you're going to make a business with your art, it's almost like having two different brains. You need to have your creative artist maker brain and your business brain. And if you imagine them as two people and one car, you are the car. You've got two little people in there. When you're creating, when you're making, when you're coming up with the ideas, I hate the word ideating, but that seems to be a buzzword on YouTube at the moment. When you're ideating, no, when you're creating, darling, you want the creative, the little creative person to take the wheel and drive that car. But when you're making business decisions, you want your business person to drive that car. If you are running a business and you do want to make money and you're doing it with something creative, there is a balance to be met. If you want to make money from your art, then you are at some point going to have to tell the creative person to just take a break and start thinking with your business brain. And let phrases like selling out stay outside, because they're just not helpful. And sometimes I think it keeps creatives small. This whole starving artist trope has just got to end. It drives me crazy. It does not make you a better creative artist, maker, if you are starving and not making any money. It doesn't make you any better a creative than someone who is creative and making a living from their art. I'm getting into a ranty tangent now, so I'm gonna stop. As I said at the beginning of this video, hopefully there's been something of use here. Take what serves you, leave the rest. And if nothing else, I hope it's just kept you company for however long this video ends up being. I have no idea. I've stopped and started it so many times. So once I put all the footage together, it'll be interesting to see what's left. And just to confirm, because I think I mentioned this last week, but I'm confirming it now, we are sticking with the Coffee and Craft podcast because you guys seem to like it just as it is, and that suits me fine. So unfortunately, I am going to end it here because I am now out of coffee. If you're not done and you want to see some more podcast episodes, then I shall give you this playlist of the Coffee and Craft podcast. I've got videos in there about sales, what I think is the future of handmade, how things can be quite tough at the moment, etc., etc. So if you're not done, you can head on to one of those videos and I will see you there.